okay, we are recording, and I'll try and not switch off the internet with my ear, as is often the case. And if you can't hear me for a while, it might be because the Wi-Fi has switched itself off, which has happened, unfortunately, already once. So let's hope that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it's not the best connection, but hopefully, I mean, that's what happens when you're hiding in a corner in the middle of Arabia, talking about illicit topics. So I mean, go on.
I like Arabia. Got a very kind of, I know the connotations for 1950s movies and kind of eras of politeness and etiquette. Whereas now, when you think of golf, you think of oil, and when you think of the Middle East, you think of terrorists. It's how malleable people's minds have become. But it is easy, isn't it, for things to just become synonymous with whatever it is the state chooses.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that people comes to mind is beheadings, burqas, extremism. There are all of these things that are kind of that people make associations with Sharia, and there's lots of things that come into people's head, but definitely sheiks shitting on people for 50k is definitely something that comes to mind when I think of that region of the world. It's quite big business at the moment.
The word Sharia. When I have to be, when I think of that word, it reminds me of a lady that grew up in a, let's say, lower middle class area of Birmingham that hangs out with friends called Lisa and Keisha, and they drink Stella behind the bus cabin once a week, or the bus shelter at school. It's kind of ring to it, you know what I mean?
Sharia. Did you have Sharia? Fucking
Sharia. Accent. I wanted to do that impression, but I have to be somewhat cautious. Not too cautious. I'm in a corner, but you never know. There are choppy shops.
Yeah.
If anyone's going to get choppy shopped, I'm going to get choppy chopped. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And actually, I quite like that. I quite like to be on the list. Would you not? Would you not like to be on the list of the choppy shop, and then just as it's about to happen, it all gets revoked, and you get shipped back to the embassy, and you get a nice beef sandwich, and it all is just blown under the rug. The fact that you nearly got your head chopped off.
Yeah, I mean, you've experienced that a few times on your travels. But yeah,
and he was going to chop his head off, and then he called me and I told you the story, so I won't go into it. He called me and a friend in a restaurant, and we were having a great time. We just arrived in Afghanistan, everything was great. We're like, bloody hell, this is lovely. My phone rings, and my mate's like, yeah, I just got kidnapped. So I just chopped my head off. That's a true story.
How how did that story go, and how did it end? Like, that's what we want to know. I think we have to.
Well, I don't know the full. I told you that story before, didn't I? I'm pretty sure.
No, he's never been heard from since, or
no, he got out. No, he called me after he left the country, so he literally just he went across the border afterwards, and then he knew I was in Afghanistan, so he thought it'd be best to call and just tell me I nearly got my head chopped off, got kidnapped. But I think he might have had some worse stuff done to him, but he just doesn't want to say.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we know how those Afghan military boys get down.
I think he probably got desert gang. I don't know, but he was back to the other team anyway, so surely it's just a bonus.
Oh God. Yeah, exactly. So on our last we actually did record a pod that was failed because of not very good connection, and I was somewhat lubricated, inebriated, intoxicated at the time as well, which yeah, so maybe it could be for the best that that one didn't make it to air. But so is this like 26.5 this episode?
Uh,
What do we call this? Was it 27 or
I think we did have a.
26.1?
I think we did have a point 0.5 at some point, didn't we? I'm sure we did. I'm sure there was a point 0.5 episode.
Yeah, was
I
it
think
like at like maybe 22 or something with like a,
yeah,
or maybe 13.5, but it would have been something that was numerological. I'm pretty sure it was something numerological.
which is everything because you can interpret anything to make it numerologically important, which I
Pretty
would
much.
say is the problem sometimes with some people that post similar things to what we discuss. I think people can take it a little bit too far. Like, the channel decoding our reality, which is a very interesting channel. The guy is very proficient when it comes to debunking, decoding, understanding the next level of truth. However, he does take it a little bit too far, where he's kind of like, yeah, so 100 plus 45, if you minus the 9 from that and you times it by all the countries in the world and what I have for breakfast, then you reach the magic number, and that means there's going to be a volcano tomorrow. And then the next,
And the next, yeah, and he's been wrong a million times,
yeah,
but
literally this week he's like,
he's
oh, I was totally wrong about that, but it's going to happen next week.
yeah, exactly. And when we I mean, obviously there's a time when you need to kind of like use discernment, like, is this numerological or is this, coincidental? Because numbers exist, right? We know 33 exists, 66 exists. It's like, if you count to 100, you're going to say 66, but when you say 66, does that mean you're a fucking Satanist? No. Like, everybody who lives at number 66, are they a Satanist? Absolutely not. Everyone who lives at number 33, are they a Freemason? Absolutely not. um
Houses actually bought by people that are part of the club. I don't think you can find a house unless it's in the fucking sticks that no one wants to kind of visit, a place no one wants to actually live. But in the city of London, any major city in the world, any number 33 and number 66 and number 666 is bought up by members of the fraternal order 100%. Every guild, every secret society owns those buildings outright 100%. And the same as telephone numbers as well. If I call Vodafone and I'm like, I want to buy a custom number and I want to have 666 at the end, or 66 or 333, but especially with the sixes, I guarantee those numbers are taken.
No, I would say, in fact, I know because I work in housing, that people who, yeah, quite probably aren't complicit can obtain such numbers in, I'm not saying like in Mayfair, but in respectable streets with, a good market value. It can exist like that. Okay, so case in point, Benjamin Franklin. Obviously, this is premiere. We're talking about Charing Cross Station, bang outside Charing Cross Station, anywhere like that. All the 33s and 66s absolutely will be bought out in that vicinity. It just depends on how far out we're talking. It's like, you got high value areas like, I don't know, let's just say, I don't know, Norwood or Peckham or places in Islington, for example, that in North, places like maybe like King's Cross, where, yeah, things are valuable still. The property market is, somewhat lucrative, but not every single, building has been, bought out by, yeah, the the old boys club, as it were. So
I think
I
it's
would
possible.
say that it's highly probable, 100%. I wouldn't say 100% purely because I don't know, and that would be presumptuous in my opinion. But generally speaking, yes, and almost every, not 100%, but almost every major corporation and company incorporates these numbers into their thing. Even like in terms of, housing, I won't say exactly which, borough I work for. But there are certain things like the pricing. So there are certain default fees that we pay that three different tiers of customer have to pay. And these fees are either £6, £16, or £26. I mean, what? Like, those are quite random. Like £6. So obviously three sixes. Each one ends in a six, six, 1, 6. And then if you had the one and the two from the start, it's three. So it's 3, 6, 6, 6. But anyway, then it goes a step further. We have a fourth default fee, which is another quote unquote random number. Guess what it is? £69.33. That's the fourth. We've got four default fees: £6, £16, £26, and £69.33. And also, this is a government body or a subsidiary to local authority, a GLA, government local authority. So yeah, I think it's very safe to deduce that that's deliberate, and it just doesn't make any sense. It's numerological and it's linked to the government.
So
So
taking that point, if we are to
mm,
deduce that, that is indeed the case, which it is,
mm,
and we know that even the most mundane of things, they can create a numerological alignment to that and make it important. So let's say a dog was run over on the street tomorrow, they'd say, oh, the dog's owner was 33 and it was hit by a car at 3:30, and I don't know, there were 6 witnesses, something like that, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
There aren't that many 33s, triple sixes in London in terms of property. Maybe a couple of thousand buildings, and like you say, the
yeah,
Belgrade and the Mayfairs, all the affluent areas will have those properties owned by members of various fraternal orders, people that have bought them for that exact reason. Of course, they're not going to be inclined to live in, let's say, a shitty area of Peckham, although Peckham's becoming quite affluent now. But those
yeah,
properties still flagged and maybe given to lower down members in this compartmentalized system, kind of newbies or people that they intend to use at some point in the future, remembering that, of course, for our
indeed,
audience, everything is programmed, and you can take it to any level, but people would hear us now that perhaps don't have an understanding of how the system works, perhaps just a kind of someone that strolled along onto the channel that doesn't already listen to these kinds of debates and discussions, and therefore doesn't understand the context, and they would think it's ludicrous to assert such a thing. But if they actually place a little bit of time, to research, these kinds of stories that I just gave example to, the numerological alignments, then they would soon realize that it's all about mockery. It's essentially a giant joke. And I think we've discussed before, there was a little group that John Wayne, the famous Hollywood cowboy, used to be a part of.
mm-hmm,
Another Masonic kind of a subsidiary of Masonry, one of these, fraternal orders, these frats essentially. And, they would drive around with go-karts, and they'd have those little red, I always forget the name of them, the Turkish, the little red hat with the tassel on the top. And they would all wear like deep dark shades, and that would be their kind of game because it's all fun for them. Part of the reason why these people get into positions of authority is because there is a missing link in their brain somewhere. They've suffered abuse. They are to suffer abuse. They've got some kind of psychological trauma. They are probably traumatized with the intention of having them placed at certain positions in society in the future, and therefore it's kind of a systematic uh, desire for the status quo cabal to ensure that all of their minions are deluded to some kind of degree, pun intended. And as a consequence of that, they are susceptible to doing silly things and having these kinds of mocking jokes played out day upon day, every hour of the day, with respect to every corner of the world. Whether it's like I gave example to there, a dog being killed at 3:30 p.m. with a 33-year-old owner, or something more sinister, maybe 66 people blowing up in a, I don't know, a car bomb or something like that. Numbers are always applied later. And because of that, going back to what we were talking about with respect to housing, they would certainly shortlist every property and use it for one of their ritualistic practices at some point in the future. It doesn't necessarily mean that, the average number 33 property that's sub 200k in some shitty area of Blackburn in the north is going to, contain some kind of high degree mason, some master, someone that's, essentially a part of the system. But they will use those properties for child abuse. They will use them for some kind of endeavor at some point, because it has to be a property with respect to discussion about properties with those numbers. It would never be 42, it would never be 17, it would never be any of those. It has to be, because that is the code that they live by. That is their religion. They may not have the knowledge at the lower levels to understand, the deep intricacies around their origin and why they are there and why they are being used and why the system is so advanced and crazy and deluded. But what they do understand is that the numbers are their idol. They absolutely have to pursue them every day. So yeah, essentially that's my point. I don't believe that it's not flagged as a number of importance to be used at some point in the future for whatever reason that may be.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, actually. So the inhabitants don't necessarily have to be complicit, but the properties will be used for these mockeries, for these rituals. They'll be on a short list potentially. There was, just another thing, like yesterday, there was a block of flats that happened to be burning down in southeast London in Catford, which has the postcode SE6. And once again, without going, too deep into numerology, SE6 equates to 30. And it's also exactly the same day of the Grenfell Towers
Really?
disaster.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
literally on the anniversary of. So S being the 19th letter, E being the 5th letter, S plus 19 plus 5 is 24. Obviously, add the 6. 6 is obviously, as we know, and it works in so many different ways, because 24 is 2-4, which is 6. So 24, so 2-4-6, 6-6. Yeah, anyway, you get my point. And yeah, sometimes when things happen of that magnitude, it's like, okay, is this coinky dinky, or is this esotericism? Is this occultism? Is this mockery and these sorts of things? It's drawn like detailed, and more often than not it is. More often than not it is. And as he said, like, this is the language that they speak. They speak in codes, they speak in riddles, they have an interesting sense of humor. And you need to be attuned to these things, and they say, like, to understand. And there's definitely levels of understanding, which another thing. And it just goes to yeah, to everything, their phone numbers, their VAT registration numbers, and all of these things. Once your eyes are open, just like to see it everywhere. Shall we talk about the religion thing? Or is your safety potentially going to be compromised if we do?
I mean, it's one of those debates, those discussions, that by default has to enter into very controversial subject matters, which a public place isn't necessarily ideal.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Fair.
I'll have a. I'm going to wander back to my original chair anyway, because there's a bit more privacy over here. So I'll have a little look and see. Oh, there was a quiet room in there. I had no idea. Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, we can talk about it. I'll just be cautious.
Yeah. So, I mean, so. Oh, just a quick one. National Gambling Helpline, phone number 0808 8020 Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, remember was it the child line for abused and kidnapped children and
Isn't
how
that
they
like 666 or something? It's like 0818 666 333.
Yeah, it's to everyone. It really is. It's all of them.
Let's actually let me Google it and see what it is, because I know it's got to be something ridiculous.
Scenario where Pfizer, Moderna, and uh, Johnson and Johnson all had the exact same phone number with respect to that um, ritual, and one of them removed it. Even the PO box for Google in, I think, Guernsey or Jersey was again that expected number. Because it really is, the truth is obviously always in plain sight. It's just people are conditioned to not see that because we've discussed it before. Logically, people can't comprehend in their environment that the world is actually a very tiny place because it's portrayed as being so diverse and so extensive that unless one actually travels, they would quickly realize that that's not the case. And actually, it is very feasible to compartmentalize 7 billion people, assuming there are 7 billion people. The census data that is always, supplanted in the average geography textbook for school kids is total nonsense. There's no way to gauge how many people truly live in so many places in the world. London's a prime example. I think that the London population has been just ludicrous, like increasing at such a standard, atypical rate over the last 10, 20 years. When if you actually go to London or you go to Birmingham or you go to Paris or most places in Germany, you can see the real population. And we've discussed that beforehand with respect to, I looked at the Pakistani population in the UK from the 1950s using, again, the census data supplied in these libraries from 50s onwards. And if you just take the standard birth rates for people of that cultural background, there's absolutely no way that it would be what it is today. And it's the same with, take Judaism as one such example following the Holocaust, or what is portrayed as the Holocaust. And then you look at the population of Jews in New York in the 1940s and 1930s and the population today, it's completely impossible for that data to be as it is without a drastic change, if indeed so many people were murdered. It's just basic math. But of course, people analyze this all the time. People challenge it all the time. People from Oxford, Cambridge, Harrow, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, they lose their jobs immediately. Not that anyone does it anymore, because now it's been what's the word? The lesson has been taught that if you challenge the status quo, you don't retain your positions as a professor. Or, not that you would get those positions in the first place, because the type of people that have moral caliber would never apply for them because they're intelligent enough to realize that A, they would never get the job in the first place, B, they would never get promoted once they were there, and C, that they would quickly lose it if those two magical circumstances happened, because honesty equates to losing your job in a system which is completely fraudulent. So, we're left in a situation where we can't really supplant standardized knowledge, as they would call it, within any discussion because it's based off of it's just all fictitious. It's all made up. I can't remember what we were talking about. I went on a tangent.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, no, completely. In regards to, the numbers and the birth rates, like the alleged global population of a demographic is just a joke. It's like less than like a small country, and that's what they're claiming their global population is. And that's obviously to hide the facts that they're absolutely everywhere in all kind. And then you've got all of these, pseudo shy lords who, you know, a quarter or their grandparent was, you've got like, your Joe Rogans and your David Icks and all of these sorts of people, are these shills that are there to, pushing out all these propaganda merchants, all of these influencers that are there. And then we move even higher into the realms of, politics. And then we go above politics, into who owns pharmaceutical companies and the banks and the monetary funds and the World Economic Forums and the Council of Foreign Nations and the Bilderberger groups and and all of these different the Committee of 300 and all of these different groups that exist. And it's just like, okay, it's I can see why you wouldn't want people to know that you're about and that you're as prominent as you are. Yeah,
They want people to know, because the genius of their system is that blood is the most important thing to so many people in the world. Being related to another individual, for the most part, grants a level of loyalty off of
yeah,
nothing other than that blood
yeah,
relation, right?
yeah.
At the same time, they try and destroy and disseminate everyone, sorry, disseminate only within their confines of their society, but everywhere else they try and destroy it. They try and chop it up into as many different pieces as possible, which is why we have all of these, these non-grassroots organizations springing out, whether it's BLM or this LGBT stuff or transgenderism or anything. It's intended to slice society just like a pizza and sprinkle as many different toppings on the top, so that no one is content with their immediate society, with their community. There is no community in essence, which is what they want. But of course, the contrary is the case for their social group, because they sponsor only the opposite of what they preach and supplant everywhere else in society. Because everybody, by the laws of logic, knows that a healthy society is a society that gets along. And how do people get along with one another? Usually because they have something in common. There's a common interest there. And of course, the more division there is, the more difference, the more division is likely. And that's something that they don't have in their own immediate culture, of course. It's just such a simple strategy that's just being used time and time again, divide and conquer, of course. Um, and there's no way to sponsor an alternative pathway in a society that is monopolized by this group of individuals.
And that's the perfect segue into the topic of religion and how that's used and how the different religions are used. So, as we know, Judaism is arguably one of the most, yeah, secular. Just like you've got like a couple of different. You've got Orthodox, Hasidic, um, and that's about it. Really, in regards to there's not really infighting amongst them. Like in Islam, you've got the Sunnis and the Shias, and in Christianity, you've got like so many different denominations that like it's literally like the Bible. Yeah, I mean the amount of different people that use the Bible: Catholics, Christians, Mormons, Jehovah
Well,
Witnesses.
see,
The list on and on. Greek
I'll make
Orthodox.
I'll make a quick point on the last two, because, of course, they're not really Christian denominations at all. They were created and funded by the Warburg family, which is a Zionist family. So they actually funded essentially Mormonism and created it to be what it is today in terms of its leverage within, I guess, areas of mid-America like Utah and Colorado, etc. But on an international scale, there's a lot of missionary work undertaken by them. But their origin, the money comes from the Warburg family, which is one of the most influential financial families ever to have existed in modern history. So then you have to question, why would you fund something that's so opposed to your own faith, your own belief system? Because of course it corrupts Christianity, because it has absolutely nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever, at least the original text. Mormonism is a complete. I hope there's no Mormons near me now. They're very nice people, but as a faith, it's a cult. Period. It's a cult. I mean, you could argue that with everything, but it is so
Yeah,
openly cultism.
definitely.
And the same goes for Jehovah's Witnesses. You see them on every street corner, just like you'd see a Scientologist in a boulevard in Los Angeles trying to coax people into the door. It's the same principle. Again, the whole idea is to mock and to divide something that is your polar opposite or your competition. It's just basic business practice, and who's better at business than said groups of people? So very quickly they realize that the lobbying capacity in the United States, if you get, the Christian card on your side, is impregnable. So in order to do that, they diluted Christianity from what was for many centuries Protestantism and Catholicism, and they created all of these denominations and made it possible for anyone to be a pariah of Christianity. I can be a pastor if I want to today and marry someone tomorrow by making an application on the internet. I mean, does it get more? What's the word I'm looking for? The word. But the idea is just to mock to the utmost, of course. Whereas if you tried to enact that with respect to the faiths that we're discussing now, that would never happen. That would never be allowed, of course, never. Quite rightly too, quite rightly. And
Yeah, I
the
don't
same
think you,
strategy.
yeah, I don't think you could just become like a rabbi or an imam by sending a
I
few
know.
emails. I mean,
Or
that
you
being said, actually, maybe you could. um, you
go
know,
to half a decade at least and only then would you be allowed entrance should you fit the remit, the biological remit. So you wouldn't be permitted to join yourself to that system unless you fit their paradigm with respect to your genetics.
in regards to Judaism, absolutely. Like, I mean, yeah, there's a reason. Like, there's literally like a whole different sector for Black Jews. Like, they call them Hebrew Israelites, but essentially they're supposed to be like the same thing. But no, it's like, if you come from a different gene pool, then yeah, you go over there. So yeah, that's bizarre as well. So I don't think it says. I mean, maybe it does say that in their in the Old Testament that they look at. Um, the Torah. Yeah, maybe it does say that in the Torah. I know, who knows? Because a lot of these books are full of shit, right? I mean, that's why I honestly couldn't say that there is one that's better than another, because I think all of them are problematic, and all of them are created and contradictory, and can somewhat be disproven. All of them promote strange things, kind of like violence, weird types of paedophilia, and just like subjugation of others, child sacrifice. All of these things are spoken about openly in these books. We can start with the Old Testament or the Torah, where this God is allegedly told some Joseph to sacrifice his child on like top of the mountain, and they sacrifice all of these animals and all of this sort of stuff. Like, yeah, kill them. Oh yeah, because God needs the blood of innocents, right? And then we go to the New Testament, and like, yeah, you can do anything wrong. You can be a killer, murderer, adult. It doesn't matter as long as you repent. You'll be forgiven. You go to heaven. So essentially, that's telling you there's no accountability. And then we move to the newest one, Islam, and yeah. Mohammed was either a 9-year-old or a 14-year-old who he's supposed to have been, married to, and all kinds of, and it contradicts others in terms of saying that, well, if you do well, then, you'll go, and if you recruit others, you will, be, that's something that'll be, extremely favorable to you, which, might not sound too bad on the surface, but it contradicts what the others say, and, yeah, it's,
in that.
personally,
Could you just check if it's still recording? Because
it's
I'm
it.
concerned
Yeah,
I check
yeah,
up something.
yeah, still recording, still recording. So what I mean, I wouldn't, if I had to pick which one was the lesser evil, honestly couldn't. But what I would say is that in terms of what maybe makes the most sense, kind of goes in chronological order. So like the oldest one makes the least sense, and they kind of refined it a little bit with, New Testament, born again, kind of like Christianity, which is like, I mean, Christianity is basically Judaism 2.0. And then, and then they got like their Arab, then they brought out their Arabic religion, which was Islam, and obviously that being the newest, it actually has they've implanted a little bit more science in it. Like, there's lots of what's the word, I've forgotten the name, but anyway, there are books that talk about the formation of the Earth, and there are things that are quite accurate in regards to the formation of a fetus, the formation of clouds, etc. And obviously, that's just because it's newer, right? And yeah, it just maybe made sense to, if you're going to bring out something new, there has to be selling points. And there's got to be a reason why. Oh, I'm going to buy this new car because it does things that the old car doesn't do. It's got electric windows. It's got a CD changer or whatever it is. They did like some new things to it, changed certain things, made for a different target market in a different part of the world, rebranded it, and it's the new one. It's only like 1,400 years old. The one before that was 1,700 years old, and the one before that was about just over 2,000 years old. So it's
Comment.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
talking about that. The Brazilian that I met a few weeks ago.
yes.
She visited the mosque in Muscat, right? And it's a new mosque, and they hand out pamphlets, sizable pamphlets, almost book size actually, like a small book, in each and every language, every international language. They got Spanish, they got Portuguese, they got Dutch, English. It's quite extensive. But what was very interesting and disturbing is the front of the cover had absolutely nothing to do with religion whatsoever. It had absolutely nothing to do with Islam, had nothing to do with any religion or moral order. Guess what the picture was on the front of the mosque's official magazine? Guess. Guess what it was?
Coca-Cola? Was it
I know.
Coca-Cola?
Just come on. Something that they're having to implant everywhere now.
Was it a brand of some sort?
No, I just told you it was a spinning Earth.
A spinning what?
Spinning Earth.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So, lies are even been, pushed by.
Everywhere, no,
Yeah.
everywhere and everything. It's every construction. Now, if you look at the architecture, in which we've discussed before, the Vatican as one such example. The main assembly room in the Vatican is a snake. It's a serpent, um, and you see that with the architecture of a lot of religious iconography of today resembles religion from 100, 200 years ago in absolutely no way whatsoever. Of course, it's guised under the idea that it's modernist architecture and it's more palatable for people in a modern era, in cosmopolitan places, in big metropolis where perhaps traditional architecture wouldn't be absorbed by the general population as such. Given that people are inclined, or religion is inclined to convert, not always, but for a sizable portion of times, then that's the excuse for constructing things that in no way resemble the origin of that faith. But of course, there is no connection to the origin anymore. It's all been monetized, and it's all about profit and all this kind of stuff. St Paul's Cathedral. If you want to visit St Paul's Cathedral in London, you have to pay £25 to go into a cathedral. I think a number of years ago when there was homeless people in some kind of, I don't know if it was the Black Bloc Brigade, but some kind of protest with respect to teachers' pensions or something, people were outside of the cathedral on land that is supposedly God's land, although of course we know that is complete nonsense. But they were pushed away, pushed aside. They were arrested because, of course, it interfered with the profit margins of what is now one of the biggest tourist attractions in Europe. They turn over probably pushing 100 million a year, I imagine. And it's all
easily
an open farce and scam. Even things, for example, you get this with Christianity and in Islam. You get Islamic banks. You get, for example, I have money invested in a company called Wahid Invest, which talks about how this is kind of God's will. Investing your money with us is a good thing to do. Money itself has got absolutely nothing to do with religion at its crux and core. It's blasphemous to use God, whomever your God is, as a mechanism by which to sell a product, like especially banking, which is the most immoral just about as immoral as it gets, right? And people will call it, this is Islamic Bank, or this is the Christian bank, and this is, we follow all the protocols of the text that we're subscribing to. It's completely blasphemous. It's absolutely absurd. But no one, we've reached a point in society now on every level, not with respect to religion, just in terms of morality, where nobody even bats an eye at the most obscene things that take place on a day-to-day basis, whether it's filming someone to live stream them on YouTube that's having a struggle in the streets, or just allowing your children to be indoctrinated in a school where they openly convince your little girl that she's a little boy, or the opposite. It has reached the point of no return, which is of course why we're entering the next phase of their 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 practice, their ritual, their religion, their cultism, which is a complete financial reset, of course, which is now the only economically viable way to sustain a diminishing society. But also, that was intended from the off, because it's a mechanism by which to push society to a completely immoral world, which they have already begun, with social credits, digital currency formula, essentially very systematically designed cities and cityscapes. If you look at, the Middle East is one such example, the Gulf States are prime when it comes to that. The original formula, you could say, in the modern age would be something like New York, where everything was constructed in grid format to make kind of society more malleable. But now you can look at the Gulf States and you see it's exactly the same thing. If you go to Islamabad, many cities in Asia actually, there are districts and blocks. So you'll live in block 5, block 7, block 19. It's essentially a giant prison, and that's the aim of the game, of course. That is the aim of the game. It always was, of course, but now it doesn't need to be concealed or hidden because there's no opposition. Then now people can be thrown around like the putty that they are.
It's actually fascinating for those of us, including myself, that have not travelled to those parts. You had a very, very interesting and disturbing experience with drones and like the whole setup. Can you tell people about that a little bit?
Yeah, that was insane. Of course, the excuse used was that there was a coming light show, I believe. So in Muscat, there's a light show not every year, but for a number of years there has been apparently, and they use thousands of drones as for this particular show. But these drones are flying around months and months in advance of this event, and perhaps even before that. I haven't, obviously, I'm not situated in Muscat permanently. I can only speak from what I saw. Months before the event itself, but you've got drones flying around, and they're not flying around in some kind of format for some presentation like a light show. They're not in a specific area where that would be practical, like a beach or somewhere out in the countryside, in the desert. We're talking about they're in the city, constantly thousands of drones flying around, and it's all surveillance. It's all, that's the future. Part of it's surveillance, part of it is of course logistics. Amazon is now using drones and this kind of stuff, but with that comes surveillance, because the most valuable commodity today is not gold, it's not silver, it's not wheat, none of that. It's analytics, it's your data, what you do. That's the most valuable thing for any corporate interest, because people become more malleable and more predictable based on what you understand them to, what you understand their desires to be and their behaviors to be on a day-to-day basis. And it's pretty easy to gauge a person in almost their entirety after surveillance for a very short period of time. And surveillance is happening with our telephones and pretty much everything we do. So long term, we're in a situation where they can predict the next step years in advance.
And also, what are the regulations around owning a drone
No. So yeah, you can own a drone, and I can't own a drone, and we can't fly drones. So they're all government drones, all of them.
All of them. And to have a drone, I think you need a license, and it needs to be a certain size. And in order to get a license, there's all kinds of stipulations, for it as well, which is like pretty crazy.
Yeah, we remember when that came out, don't we? I mean, I remember when you could buy a drone And for a very short period of time, they hadn't, I guess, tech had advanced a little bit further than they anticipated, and they had to kind of cut short the freedom that you'd have to fly a drone out in the forest and take some, landscape shots, because they knew that, of course, eventually you'd end up seeing things that perhaps, that they wouldn't want the public to see. So very, very rapidly, again, simultaneously, just like with the COVID scam, these policies were implemented in every corner of the world in places which are supposedly different politically, culturally, ethnically, and yet they all adopted the same policies at the click of a finger, because, of course, all these policies derive from the same centralized lobbies. Which is why every country pretty much in the world is a member of the United Nations. So one such example, one open and public example of the hypocrisy surrounding the illusion that there is an East and West, that there is a China and a Russia and a Ukraine and the United States, and that there's real wars. They're all theatrical. They're all, of course, people die, but it's all a joke for those that govern this realm. It's not real. The illusion is necessary to maintain their economic prowess. The idea that China's the enemy economically, and Russia's dangerous, and Iran is, it's all nonsense. It's all a lie. They're all controlled by the exact same people. Centralized.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's one team running the whole show. Back to just going back to something that we touched on earlier on, and essentially who runs the show. So Childline is run by Esther Ranson. She was the founder of Childline, and she is, yeah, and right. So
all of them.
Yeah, it's just literally at the top of literally everything. Like there are no exceptions. There's no exception. None.
Every major director, every director of the Federal Reserve, everyone, every CEO of CNN, NBC, BBC, Russia Today, which is one and the same anyway. Of course, Reuters, which is the origin of all of these, is from one source.
Yeah. And when people are allowed to literally clearly say on TV that we're going to be murdering children and women, and we're also going to get the backing of the Allied forces, your USA's, your UK's, while we're doing it.
They actually did say that, though. Literally, not even.
Literally, it's not even like a paraphrase. It's like I'm probably playing it down, actually. So yeah, it's it's just like that, people kind of just go along with it, and once again, I understand there's like a subconscious trauma as well as intellectual laziness, but it's like a because I suppose that they know that it's better to maybe dip my head in the sand and carry on watching EastEnders and Love Island rather than looking at this stuff, because it's just better for my mental health, they think. And maybe for some that is the case, but I find the truth to be quite empowering, and it can set you free. Obviously, there's a balance that needs to be held. There's like a golden ratio of having this information and it not numbing you and paralyzing you. And that's when you first start looking into it, definitely if you're a human with empathy, you're gonna have days and moments when you're like, fucking hell, what the fuck is this that I'm actually experiencing? Like, what is this existence? But that tends to be at the start of the journey, and then you kind of internalize it, and it becomes you're just able to manage these things, and these things actually give you more character and resilience, and you see things for what you are. You become a stronger bolder person, and if you're somebody with integrity, you're not going to conform to the things that's who to do based on said knowledge and the fact that it doesn't fit in with your moral code. And I'm pretty sure that most of the people listening to this are on the same journey, and those words will resonate with them. and yeah, keep on the internal fight and stay on the journey is what I would say.
That's a perfect place to end this episode. That was very well.
Indeed. We think, yeah, I mean, you'll know what number this is when we upload it, 26.5, 27.5. But
I think it's 27 because the last episode was going to be 27, but that was scrapped. So this will be,
okay,
and then 28 we will cover a subject with more depth. I think we'll specify something. I think we'll do something more specific, an actual kind of subcategory of kindness. Maybe the DRC. I think we should return to the DRC.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that will be. Probably a few days. I'm flying to the UAE for a connection in a few hours, and then Iraq. So I will have time when I arrive tomorrow. From tomorrow for 5 days, and then I'm going somewhere else. So yeah, episode 28.
Indeed. Yeah, thank you for listening, people. And yeah, thanks to John for the input. And yeah, on to the next one. Wishing you all a wonderful day until next time. Ciao.